to initially very much welcome Elizabeth. Welcome, Elizabeth, and thank you so much for taking part. And just to let everybody know that one of the presenters unfortunately had to withdraw due to unforeseen circumstances. And Elizabeth really kindly, absolutely at the last minute, has picked this up and been willing to present to us. And also to say that Elizabeth is joining us, I think, from Australia. So it's wonderful and that you're able to join us, Elizabeth. And thank you so much for being willing to come and be involved with us this morning, your afternoon, evening. So I know that Elizabeth is a PhD researcher with us and is on the HEREE program. But she also works in Edith Cowan University in Australia. And Elizabeth is going to speak to us about the more research-oriented views, having worked very recently on the completion of her thesis. And she's going to talk about navigating theory and practice with regard to an international perspective in the Australian context. So thank you again, Elizabeth, and we look forward to hearing about your work and the international perspective that you will be able to offer us.
Thank you so much, Don, and thanks for everyone for just hosting this event. It's really exciting. So I'm going to talk about how I navigated theory and practice using design research methodology, and I'll also talk a bit about the research that I actually did. So I work at Edith Cowan University in Perth, Australia, and it is a fairly new university. It's just over 50 years old now, and the focus of the university is very much about providing access to university for students from underrepresented groups, so very equity focused and very inclusive focus. And for me, I've got a Bachelor of Science, I've got a Master of Teaching secondary, and finished my Master's off by research at the University of Melbourne. And from doing my research project with academics, which I'll mention in a bit, I've actually picked up a bit of casual academic work in addition to my full-time role as a senior analyst. So I was just marking assignments and supporting the ongoing implementation of the approach in a few units in the public health and nutrition area of the university. I'm very passionate about career development learning, employability, evaluation, teaching and research, and methodologies. And the focus of this presentation will be on the methodologies, but also, of course, I'll give you a bit of an insight into what my project is about. And so to also maybe get you interested in having a look at my thesis one day when it is published. So design research is the methodology that I used. And the aim of my project was to support academics and engage students in reshaping the paradigm of employability beyond individual and organisational outcomes and toward holistic considerations and contributions, which I argue in my thesis are needed for humans to thrive and positively affect our super complex world. In my thesis, I discussed two broad aspects of the problem, which my project sought to address. And these aspects, just briefly, are there's an employability policy problem. And so I reviewed the literature on what is the matter with the employability policy problem. Part of the problem is that we are measuring metrics like employment outcomes, which aren't actually the same as what employability is all about. And so, that the employability does not equal employment outcomes. And so when the government is asking us to raise employment outcomes, universities can't really directly raise employment outcomes because there's so many context-specific things that are going on. It's particularly in Western Australia where the project is situated, where I am based. Employment outcomes are not too good, and lots of people, we have a lot of mature age students, and also fewer school age students going into university, because the government has over time been talking a lot about the need for TAFE, vocational education and training, and there's also a lot of mining and that kind of thing in Western Australia, where students see the opportunities to work in the mines and earn a lot of money, and they may not necessarily go to university. And the other aspect of the problem is the curricula and teaching and learning problem. And in one of my assignments in the PhD program, the coursework component, I did a review of graduate employability models. And from that review, I established that part of the problem with employability is that, well, firstly, it's not integrated into the curriculum, properly integrated into the actual academic coursework. More so, careers advisors will come into class and present to students on a one-off basis, or they might get, or academics might ask people to come in and speak to students about what the prospects for a career might be. But the issue is that in the ways that we're doing employability, it's far removed from the curriculum, and we really want it to be integrated into the curriculum properly, so that students are getting equitable access to employability support, and also that the models of graduate employability that are reviewed in the literature are very distant from the curriculum in the way that the authors are describing their models. They don't tend to talk about actual tangible practices that can support the implementation of employability in curriculum. They say this is what people should be doing, but there's no real actual examples to support that claim. So you know, the problem is that we are using models for employability that tend not to be able to be implemented into the curriculum. And so my PhD project was about designing a framework that could enable academics to actually teach employability in the curriculum in ways that were meaningful for them and for their students in the disciplines that they were studying, and not to have to rely on being career development or career experts, and not having to rely on career practitioners to come into class. So the objectives of my research were to develop a new relational employability teaching and learning framework, to test the framework in coursework at my university in collaboration with academics, to document and establish ways to evaluate the use and effects of the framework over time. And as being a design research project, the project is actually ongoing. And then, and then expand participating academic and students' thoughts and actions regarding employability, from solely focusing on the individual's employability-related skills and outcomes to including relationships with others, so humans, species, environments, artifacts, technologies, materials, so the ways that we interact with these things and how we rely on these things throughout our careers, which is our life and our work. And so I was trying to develop a new framework, implement the framework, establish ongoing ways of evaluating the use of the framework, so then to also develop a evidence base to then promote the use of the framework over time, and to shift the way people thought about employability, so that broadening it out and making it more relevant for a relational world. So that hence the word relational employability, because everything is sort of focusing on the relational aspects. And the conceptual framework of my thesis is a merging of the notion of relational higher education, which there's a new book out by Natasha Lakovic and Arlen Oltianu that discusses relational higher education. I really encourage people to have a look at that, because it is a very important, I believe, a very important paradigm shift that will enable universities to really move with the times effectively and to incorporate all aspects of the complex world in how we work as universities and how we teach and how we research. And also, the other part of the conceptual framework is Natasha Lakovic's graduate employability paradigm, which I redesigned to make the relational employability teaching and learning framework. So my project had 3 phases. The 3 phases are spoken about in my thesis. The preparation and design phase was where it involved the published narrative review, which I did in the coursework component. I developed the prototype relational employability approach, and I created a Microsoft Sway to use in the interviews with academics and to ask them their thoughts on the framework. I recruited participants, and I actually interviewed academics, professional staff, and employability experts, and showing the Sway, which proposed the idea. So I had this prototype, and I was sort of interviewing the academics. I'd given them access to the Sway prior to the interview, and then in the interview, I prompted them with some questions about what they thought of the approach, and tried to ask them for any advice or feedback they might have, and any obstacles they could identify in using it. And then in phase 2, I actually didn't expect, so my project changed from being not at all about implementation to being about implementation, because there was a lot of interest from academics that I interviewed to actually implement. And so I did the interviews in semester 1 of 2023, not 2022. And then in semester 2, I had about 2 weeks to prepare to implement, which was very rapid, very rapid design work. I worked in 5 units across 2 academic disciplines, nursing postgraduate at the postgraduate level, and public health and nutrition at the undergraduate level, supporting 4 academics one academic of those 4 had 2 units, and each of the other academics had 1 unit. Developed resources for each unit, including assessments, rubrics, activities, videos, and study schedule. I worked with the academics to do that, and then scaffolded student learning via tutorials and online discussion forums. Supported the marking of the assessments in 2 of the units. It was really promising that in one of the units, with the framework embedded in assessment, the academic could mark the assignments with the framework herself. So they found it able to be used, and they could learn the framework, and students could learn the framework, and so it seemed to work for them. And then did some post-implementation interviews with 3 academics and 3 students, a short questionnaire for the students in the 4 units, but I got a very small response rate because it was right at the end of semester. They'd already done the university teaching evaluation survey, and so they, were a bit surveyed out by that stage. And then I looked at the assessments in the 3 units. I looked at unit level data comparing to the previous semester to make sure that the university's data on the units, to make sure that the implementation of this framework did not have a severely negative impact on the students' learning outcomes, and also developed a SharePoint site at my university for sharing the resources that we created and fostering a community of practice. And so that SharePoint site is still there, and as the research continues, I can keep inputting the research in there to help share what we've done and to get more people involved. So, and then co-presented some sessions at my university and started writing my thesis. And so phase 4 is actually what happened this year. So it continued this year. That's not covered in my thesis, obviously, because I've written my thesis. And so, so it's continuing on. what else can I say? This participants, no, I won't go into that. So this is the framework that I developed. It was fairly much like this from the beginning with the prototype stage. There was only a few changes that happened for the implementation, and then subsequent after the implementation, I made one change to the wording just here. I had called it personal career development and identities, and at the end changed it to foundational, because the first circle is about the baseline, the existing ways that we teach about employability, so the development of skills and attributes, professional identities, career action planning, all of that kind of stuff, setting goals and achieving them. And then the purple circle is all about the interactions, not just, so the blue circle is all about is your own work. The purple circle is all about how you interact with other people, how you rely on other people and how they rely on you. So all of those interactions throughout your career. And then the green circle is about your interactions with the more than human aspects of work and life. So all the interactions that you have with all the more than human aspects of life and work that involves the environments that you're working in and you're relying upon, the technologies that you're working in and relying upon, caring for other species, and sustainability in workplaces and homes, those kinds of things. So I thought I'd better share the framework so you get a bit of an idea. The research questions were, so before the implementation, research questions 1 and 2 were done before the implementation. So in the pre-implementation interviews, I asked all the participants, which included the academics at ECU and professional staff at ECU, plus external experts on employability and career development, and as well. So I got asked them what they thought, what they understood of relational employability, that prototype, and what they valued about relational employability, and then asked them how they thought the framework could be integrated in units across course levels. And then in the post-implementation, I could answer number 2 because I'd done the integration. I could talk about that, and then could also talk about research questions 3 and 4, which is what challenges, obstacles, opportunities, enablers did academics experience, and then how did students engage with the framework, and how did they think that the experience influenced their educational experience and their employability. So what have I got in my notes? So design research allowed me to ask these kinds of questions and to design a project that enabled me to kind of design the prototype and tweak it as we were going along. And design research is all about innovation. So it's about innovating something, developing using evidence-based knowledge, experience, and research. And so the methods that I used in the design research were, I did the two literature reviews really. The first one was the published review. And then the second one kind of had happened building on the knowledge that I already had. I actually have quite a lot of experience in career development, learning and embedding in curriculum since 2017. And so I kind of knew the literature anyway. So the second part of the review is in the thesis as well as the narrative review, but I kind of designed that part of the literature review to match up with the research questions. So I scoped what currently is known about employability, what's currently done about employability in curriculum, and then looked at what innovations could be done. And then did the interviews with staff and experts to refine the framework ready for use. Then I implemented with the academics and students. I did a lot of observation and note-taking, and that helped me to refine things along the way. And I had to be really flexible and adaptive, and also advisory and supportive with my teacher, designer, and researcher hats on all at once. And so being organised was really key, and maximising the use of my calendar in Outlook. I had a Microsoft Teams task list and that I used to manage my time. And I had an Excel spreadsheet for all the data collection and note-taking that I did. And when I was doing my thesis, that was really, really helpful because I put everything in there. I used in vivo for analyzing the interview data, and I worked really closely with the academics and developed a really nice rapport with them and the students, actually. And so the project itself was really emergent and very exciting, and I actually collected a lot of data from it. So, you know, after the implementation, there was staff post-implementation interviews, student questionnaires, the student interview, and I did a focus group. So there was one student at the interview, there was 2 students in the focus group. There wasn't many students that volunteered themselves, but it was because the end of the semester and they were going off on holidays and everything. But I was really appreciative of the students who did, because I got really great insights from them about the impact of the framework on them. And then I gathered institutional data, and that was for ongoing evaluation, so that we could monitor, track over time, and also, in a way, it's best practice at my university to use the institutional data. So we have the university teaching and evaluation surveys at the end of every unit, like we do in every single university. Lancaster has it too. And then we had pass rates, which we call success rates. We have, I checked out the dropout rate just to check that was not affected, and there wasn't really anything strange about that. I also looked at, what else did I look at? The weighted average marks. So just to check that there was kind of similar to previous years in the assignment, in the units where the assessments were using the framework. And then looked at, I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, all the institutional data that we use at ECU. So why design research? So I thought of action research and I thought of developmental evaluation, but I decided not to use those methodologies for my project because they focus on improving existing practices, whereas my research was developing a whole new thing and shifting mindsets with that new thing. And then I looked at design-based research, but that emphasises research over design. And I really was designing as I was researching, and they were both mutually important. And I am a I think of myself as a bit of a designer and a researcher from my educational design and career development learning design experiences. So it really made sense to use design research, which also focuses on what education could be or should be, and innovates and transforms educational practices and experiences through an equal focus on research and design. So design research allows for a broader perspective, starting by examining existing practices and systems to identify new possibilities, and then developing innovative solutions to enhance teaching and learning. So in design-based research, the research is more in focus than the design. And the term design research aligns with the goal of developing a new framework and the contribution of the paradigm shift to transform employability education. I also chose design research because I used to be an educational designer, and so the attention to design and research all at once suited my expertise and how my brain works to solve problems, which is via both research and design knowledge and practice. And I didn't call the study educational design research because the context is higher education, and I really want to distinguish between the educational design research. It also because design research is a newer methodology to higher education research, which I thought that was really important to highlight. With design research, the other reasons were that design research is evaluated against metrics of innovation and usefulness. Hence why I asked the academics at the end and at the beginning with the experts as well on what they thought about the innovation and its utility, and grounded in the experience. So the actual practice of using it. And that's how you sort of show that the approach that you've developed, the innovation that you've done has power. It often leads to practical products, which I did with the framework, and that aligned with the aim of developing the framework and implementing it. Design research involves cyclical and iterative.
Just say that you have a couple of minutes left.
Okay, I'm nearly there. Yeah.
Okay.
So it involves cyclical and iterative interventions reflecting my critical kind of innovator role as a designer researcher. And so my thesis is 1 cycle, and which is, if I wanted to include all the cycles, I'd probably be still doing my PhD for many years. So I decided just to talk about 1 cycle in the thesis, and it's an ongoing project. I've actually got an approved ethics with ECU, and so it's actually continuing, and I've got a few more people in the project team and things like that. So design research emphasises collaboration, and it aligned with my pragmatist philosophy, which is practical, organised, and focused on what works, why, and for whom. It also encourages reflection to support critical inquiry, making cautious inferences and proposing theories to explain observations. And it enables research-driven solutions to meet the needs of higher education with wider critical societal and environmental intentions. So it really aligned with what I was proposing to do. And that is it. So if you do have questions, you can email me. That is my email. And I'll see if there's any questions in the chat. And sorry, I went over.
Okay, no problem, Elizabeth. And thanks ever so much for that presentation. Thank you.
That's a pleasure. And sorry I talk so fast, but I thought I've got so much to say, and I didn't practice because I didn't have time. So yeah, I just spoke like a thrashing machine.
I was very conscious that you'd come into it at the very last minute, and I was very grateful for that. So thanks ever so much for that, and thanks for the insights, and also the way that you're looking at it in an Australian context. And I think actually that this is, what you're looking at is also something that many others are looking at and thinking about within their own contexts around the world. And it seems that some institutions are perhaps more advanced in terms of their thinking about this, but nevertheless integrating this can be quite a challenge. So it's excellent that you've looked at this in terms of how that might happen and how that might be developed further. So thanks ever so much for that. And as you say, if anyone has any questions, if they could put those into the chat to you and you could respond or could email them to you, that would be wonderful. So thanks again, Elizabeth. And we'll move on to our next speaker, HEREE Briffa. HEREE is also a PhD researcher in the department